Thank you. Thank you for organizing this seminar, and I'm very happy to be here at the EUR. And I would like also to thank PostGenAI Paris for this fellowship opportunity. My project is called Governing Data Commons in the Post-Generative AI Web. I'm just starting my talk here to see where I'm going. So the project examines collective action among knowledge organizations and especially open collaborative projects like Wikipedia and heritage institutions such as libraries, as they navigate a paradigm shift in how knowledge is accessed, mediated, and valorized on the web in the context of generative AI. Just a few words to situate my background. My training is interdisciplinary. It is rooted in media studies, cultural studies, and science and technology studies. And for this project, I draw on the conceptual frameworks of critical data studies. I have used digital ethnography, participant observation, interviews, mostly partnership-based research approaches in the context of this project. So my primary case of analysis is Wikimedia, which is the broader organization that stewards Wikipedia and a series of related projects. Wikimedia represents one of the most compelling examples of an open knowledge commons on the web. It is rooted in commons-based peer production and characterized by community-driven governance. It gives access to more than 380 million articles, files, and other items in over 300 languages. Freely licensed, and its editorial governance rules are defined by a federation of communities of about 300,000 volunteer editors across the globe. By comparison, heritage collections held in national libraries like the French Bibliothèque Nationale de France fall more into the category of public goods with a state mandate and institutional governance. But today, both types of organizations face similar challenges in the context of generative AI. I use the term in my title data commons to stress this specific point. Generative AI pipelines are turning knowledge into data using encyclopedia articles and heritage collections as training material for models, but also as retrieval resources for conversational agents. And they also disintermediate access to knowledge, severing the ties between knowledge and the social context of its production, for knowledge cannot be reduced to a resource to exploit, but must be understood as a social practice rooted in epistemic communities. Knowledge as social practice. So the research objectives of the projects are the following: to examine how generative AI unsettles knowledge commons model of open access, how extractive data practices by access threaten their sustainability, and how knowledge organizations develop new value propositions and strategic coalitions to advance AI governance on the open web. So generative AI technologies, as you know, rely on deep learning architectures that are fundamentally dependent on massive data sets. But today, the web is increasingly shaped by massive data extraction to feed AI pipelines. It is marked by a growing sense of extractive asymmetries, that is, the uneven burdens and benefits involved in data harvesting, where a few powerful actors extract value from content that is produced and maintained by public or civic infrastructures. So in this context, organizations that produce, curate, and maintain open knowledge, they must navigate an ecosystem where their data is both critical for AI development and vulnerable to extraction and misappropriation. The relentless scraping of web data by AI crawlers places a significant technical and financial burden on content hosting organizations, including Wikimedia, which maintains one of the largest collections of openly licensed content in the world. In January 2026, Wikimedia had to block up to 2.7 billion hostile automated requests to protect its servers from crashing. And since 2024, bot traffic has actually surpassed human traffic on the web. And many heritage institutions face the same issue. In this survey by Michael Weinberg, 70% of respondents reported an increase in traffic to their website that they attribute to bot activity. So they struggle to maintain access for human users as their servers buckle up under bot swarms that are indifferent to the harm they cause to online cultural heritage access. Another issue is that with the advent of AI-generated information synthesis within search engines, for example, Google AI overviews, users increasingly bypass original content, raising concerns about what some have described as the death of the click. And this shift has real consequences for Wikimedia projects. Human traffic fell 8% between January 25 and 26, and between 2022 and 25, Google referrals dropped 22%, accounting for nearly all of Wikipedia's decline in human traffic. So the result is a sustainability threat for Open Knowledge Commons. In the case of Wikimedia, this threat operates across 4 dimensions: infrastructure, finances, audience, and labor, with higher maintenance costs faced with this aggressive scraping. Also, lack of attribution leads to fewer human visitors and hence less donations, less contributors because less people know about the project, and also lack of attribution and lack of visibility raises the risk of less acknowledgement of contributors' work and then less motivation, and so again, less contributors. So this sustainability challenge is tied to what has been called the paradox of reuse, which is that the very openness that makes these commons valuable, enabling free access and reuse by anyone, also makes them vulnerable to large-scale exploitation. This could be seen as a new iteration of the tragedies of the commons. There is indeed a paradigm shift currently happening on the open web. Some describe this as a break in a social contract and the need for a new social contract for data in the AI era. But I would argue that probably such a contract never quite existed. What has changed is the sheer scale of exploitation. The capacity to extract value from the open web has grown exponentially with AI. What is clear is that there is a profound lack of reciprocity between those who extract value from the open web and those who produce and maintain these resources. And even more, there are evidences of disregard for the fragility of knowledge commons and the importance of preserving them. Suri, a colleague of yours, maybe you have a different point of view, but last week, a principal applied scientist at Microsoft, who is also a former Wikimedian, so he has like one foot in each world, in a public event, argued that these are large for-profit corporations. They are focused on pushing profit for shareholders, and the commons is seen as a resource to take advantage of. He doesn't think there is a real concern about the fact that Wikipedia or other digital commons could go away, and he didn't think that the question is even asked. So in this context, my take on the issue, however, has been to move away from a focus on the realienation of the commons and instead to analyze this dynamic through a relational conception of platform power. And I draw from previous studies by Niebuhr et al. And Van Dyck in the field of platform studies to map and understand dependencies that form within broader platform ecosystem looking into power asymmetries and unequal relations of dependence, which led me in the previous phase of the project to ask the following questions. What is Wikimedia's position within an ecosystem of interconnected platforms, and what are the political implications of this entanglement? And I've been especially interested in Wikimedia Enterprise, which is a for-profit subsidiary that was created in 2021 by the Wikimedia Foundation to sell access to Wikimedia data. It's actually a series of API. I would tell a little bit more later. So to analyze this, this shift, which was a big move in the Wikimedia movement, I played with the words here, and enterprise. So it's both the enterprise like a company, but also the idea of mutual attachment. A prise is like a grasp on something. So the idea in this relational conception of platform power that there's a hold on Wikimedia, but Wikimedia can hold back because this is a relational system, I would say. Okay, so so the idea was to look into Wikimedia Enterprise as an attempt to exert control over this relationship and to influence the other party. In this perspective, Wikimedia Enterprise can be seen as a commercial leverage point and a site for technological development that fits into a proactive strategy in the context of AI disruption, rather than only a defensive strategy. So the idea behind Wikimedia Enterprise is to monetize a commercial data ingestion pipeline. So what is sold is not the data, because actually the foundation doesn't own the license. So it's not a licensing contract. What they sell is the pipeline, not the water, as a Wikimedia employee said in an interview. So they sell the high volume access to the data. And for that, they had to develop a technological layer. This strategy also combines this technical development with an assetization of commons data. And also they rely on contract law. So instead of relying on the goodwill of companies to respect an implicit social contract, it is rather an effort to, through contract law, to regain control over data flows. But this decision was made at the level of platform governance to regulate relationships between Wikimedia and external forces. Another then research question that arises is whether this might cause another sustainability crisis at the internal level of community governance, because there are tensions around the creation of Wikimedia enterprises. So I looked into these tensions that arise when platform scaling, between platform scaling for digital commons and the preservation of community-driven governance. What I've witnessed in previous participant observations is this tension between some employees at the national chapters and at the Wikimedia Foundation who want to push for technological development and who see the governance, the decision-making processes, the community-driven decision processes that can be very slow. They see it as an obstacle for the pace of the technical development, which they think is needed. Whereas other members of the movement really stress the importance of community. And I like this sentence by an employee of the Wikimedia Foundation: in technological development within the movement, community is a feature, not a bug. To this partial conclusion, which is that data commons governance must be understood not only at the stewardship of information repositories, but above all as the development of organizational forms that embody specific ethics and politics of access to knowledge. Okay, which leads me to the current phase of the project, which focuses on relationships between the Wikimedia movement and heritage institutions. I sometimes use GLAMs as galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. So this builds on the observation that there is a growing networking activity between the Wikimedia movement and these other organizations in the heritage sector who are very interested in the Wikimedia enterprise model. And this effort of networking is also driven by a need to build agency, collective agency in this context. So the new research question is the following: around what shared objects, standards, and values do open knowledge commons and public heritage institutions build new forms of strategic coordination in response to the AI environment? A first hypothesis is that while both types of organizations share certain values like access to knowledge, there are differences and very significant in practices, in scale, in governance logics, and this dynamics should be examined through a pluralistic lens. One model cannot fit all. The second hypothesis is that so for the second hypothesis, I'm looking at the Model Context Protocol, which is a fairly new 2024 open standard for the agentic web, which aims to integrate AI system with external data sources and tools. And by external data here, I'm interested in knowledge commons or heritage data. So the hypothesis is that the MCP functions as a boundary object for strategic coordination because it is sufficiently plastic to accommodate the specific re-intermediation needs of different actors, Wikimedia, different types of GLAM actors, while remaining robust enough to serve as a shared lever for reclaiming collective agency in AI governance. So there are two dimensions in this new direction of work. The first one is to look at whether MCP servers can be an efficient interfacing layer that can function as a regulation tools in the access, in shaping the access of AI agents into web resources, commons resources. And the second dimension is on governance. So it looks at whether experimenting with MCP protocols and servers can be used as a lever to claim more inclusive governance of agentic AI standards. What you can see here is the governance structure of the Agentic AI Foundation, which was created a year or two ago under the Linux Foundation. And what you see when you read the structure is that the voting rights are proportionate to the sum of money you put on the table. So it's really a governance model that's based on how deep your pockets are. Non-profit institutions, organizations can apply for an associate membership at no cost, great, but there is absolutely no voting rights. It's simply a position of being an observant and not have any agency in the development of these protocols that affect their existence on the web, I would say. Okay, so my last slide is this one. So to examine these new dynamics of coordination around MCP, I am organizing next week a workshop with the National Library of France, the Sorbonne Center for Artificial Intelligence, and Wikimedia France. And the goal is to standardize, is to first share expertise on NCPs because it's pretty new and many heritage institutions don't know exactly yet what it is, what to do with it. Wikimedia just last week released a first experiment with MCP servers. So first goal is to share expertise. And the second goal is to work with a prospective scenarios. So to generate future scenarios on how things can turn out for knowledge commons, to also generate hopefully actionable insights on open knowledge governance. And this will likely feed into a position paper as a concrete output for the fellowship. I'll stop here. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Nathalie, for this excellent presentation. And I should remind here that you're here as a fellow with the program with PostGenAI with Sorbonne and DNF, and this is exactly what we want to do. Is that great scientists come and input intelligence in what we're actually doing in the real world, also not just to science. These are huge questions, and while our colleagues are preparing their questions and comments, I was actually suggesting for this question of what part of governance, other people than big capitalist and extractivist organizations could have in this system, that the voting rights in the new business models could be obtained just by giving data, right? Because the value here in the new system is not in the models, because you can make models very easily in the next few years if you have the data. But making the data is where really the value is. And what's happening currently is like basically some people are robbing the data that have been collected by others, including the public. But there's also a lot of data which have not been robbed yet because they're behind firewalls in lots of industries and organizations. And unfortunately, people are using AI without being aware that this is a way that all these data are going away. But so if we want to have a new form of governance of these things that are based on ownership, the ownership of data could become something. There's a paper in the Proceedings of the Paris Institute of Advanced Studies that describes this, that I wrote up a year or so ago for the European Commission. Do colleagues have currently questions to give you or not? Or should I continue to hold the floor until someone finally decides themselves? Yes, Sid.
So lovely talk, Nathalie. It's super interesting to hear Wikimedia's response to this. I wasn't aware of it. It's pretty interesting. I love this bit about monetizing the pipeline. My question is very simple. So two-part question. Number one is, why didn't they do this sooner? Search engines have been using their data for years and monetizing their data for years, decades even. So why now? And then second, are other institutions following suit? For example, like Stack Overflow was, has it received, existential threat to the amount of traffic they get? Are they doing the same thing? If not, why not?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. The question, why sooner? Actually, they started Wikimedia Enterprise before generative AI became something public, like before. It's 2021 that it was first launched. It came from a need to diversify the sources of funding. Even today, the vast majority of the revenues of the Wikimedia Foundation is small donations across the globe. So $5 donations by hundreds of thousands of people across the globe. But they were anticipating shifts in an uncertainty, economic uncertainty. So they were trying to diversify their source of revenues. That's why they created that. Why not sooner? I think they did it when they were ready, because as I mentioned, it was a conversation that was not easy with the community. So I guess it took time to find the right way to do this. The second question is, are other organizations doing the same thing? I'm not aware, like I know Reddit is licensing their content, but I think something that is specific to Wikimedia is that they are not licensing the content. So other organizations like news organizations, Le Monde, for example, they are licensing their content to OpenAI and others. But this is a very different economic model. Actually, what I think is interesting with this Wikimedia model is the idea of like it's the question of how do you make money out of something that is there for free?
Yeah, exactly.
For all, and that is
Exactly.
staying there for free for all. And so I think this, this is economic value crafting intertwined with technological development. How do you build a regulation layer that is both an economic, a layer and a technical layer, and so far that has proven successful.
That's super compelling. That point you just made about how do you sort of monetize something that's available for everyone? It's a paradox, and that's an interesting point. I like
the other thing, if I may just mention quickly, is that in the free license, perspective, you cannot discriminate by the type of user. So they could not say the big tech, the big companies, they're going to pay more, and the small companies or small organizations, they will pay less.
I see.
Yes, so what they did is that they discriminated by the usage volume.
Okay.
So the size of the pipeline that is needed to feed some type of uses.
Cool, thank you.
I think Sean, you're next, is that correct? Or Matti, whatever. Matti.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much. Very, very interesting and timely. I had a question about the concept of knowledge commons. I think that's highly fascinating. Kind of, you're alluding to of course the existence of different communities that are kind of managing these knowledge. At the same time, if we think about the context where commons have been used in a more than the natural environment, it's a bit different kind of logic there. I mean, the critique of Ostrom was to say that okay, this is the community can prevent others to going to harvest resources from the nature. So the commons is not open in the sense that you need to have always some kind of membership there, whereas then the seas are open and anybody can fish. So I think this is an interesting aspect which you also discuss, and the question that it's not the nature that is kind of bringing these fruits, but it's human beings who collect these informations. Perhaps it's somebody's research. So it's a different kind of logic. What is knowledge in relation to, let's say, natural resources in a common setting? So perhaps perhaps it's much more related to licensing and property rights in this question, even though we talk about openness. It's a quite interesting the language we use. So if you have reflections on that, thanks.
Yes, thank you for the question. I was while preparing this talk, revising, like going back to the critique that Ostrom and S addressed to this idea of the tragedy of the commons. And in knowledge commons, the idea was that because it's a non-rivalrous good, it is not exhaustible. Right? It's not like all of the trees are cut down and it takes years or decades to rebuild the forest. If I have a book, if I read it, you can also read it, and it does not exhaust the resource. However, what we see now with massive data extraction is a kind of exhaustion, not of the resource itself, the data is still there, but of financial resources to maintain the infrastructure of access and also of the community. Because the key value of an open knowledge commons is actually not the resource itself, it's the community that builds and maintains the resource. And if there is less and less contributors, there's less people to check the quality of the content, and so the value of the resource itself, is depreciated. So that is why I think that the key threat is the exhaustion of the community. Another dimension I didn't mention is that with the rise of LLM tools, there is more and more AI-generated content on the projects. So it takes a lot of work by the contributors to check and correct. So it's a multi-sided, risk of community exhaustion. And
Thank you.
yeah, no, thank you.
Nathalie, thank you so much for your talk. Very provocative, super interesting, more turtles. I think actually my comments quite well aligned with Mati's, but I wanted to push it this discussion of the knowledge commons a little bit further into materialism and the natural environment, even further than Mati did. I was thinking about your early slides about the costs of running the physical servers increasing. And I was thinking about the raging debates in the United States right now about the building of these server farms and the natural resources that they're using up, and the backlash against them that's occurring. And I start to wonder, if I remember right, I heard an analogy. I think it was the CTO of NVIDIA. I saw him give a talk at one point where, I think it was GPT-2 or something. It took the energy equivalent of flying a 737 from New York to LA. It was like the fuel requirements was the same back and forth. I think it was 2 times. I don't remember the exact numbers, but anyways, in the context of the theoretical question of the commons, I wonder if there's actually a connection between the material constraints and this is where the commons are going to sort of actually be enforced, because you're having a societal reaction against the physical manifestation or the physical and material and environmental consequences of the exploitation of the knowledge commons from society at large. Like, is this the place that people will actually react against it? Because that's real, right? It's the server farm, the data farm in my backyard that I can actually do something to protest, to prevent, to actually act out against. So, was Marx right? Is there a sort of a materialism here that actually creates a connection where we were just sort of talking about a disjuncture between a data commons and a material commons? Anyways, just some thoughts.
Well, thank you. It's a great question. There are 2 ways in which I can see I could answer. The first one, probably the closer to your question, is about like energy consumption. So for a long time, Wikimedia is a dinosaur, right? It was built in Wikipedia in 2001. It relies on MediaWiki, which is a software that actually doesn't consume much because it's mainly, access to its content. So the cost of maintaining it in terms of energy consumption is relatively low compared to like AI tools. But so now the question is, if the movement moves toward developing, small models, tools that are beyond, what it's been maintaining so far, so moving into AI production, then it will increase, of course, its imprint, its socio-ecological imprint. it's not there yet. It's debated. So that's one thing to look at. The other one, in terms of materialism of digital infrastructure, I've been looking into that. I have a paper that's sleeping in drawer about the infrastructural consequences of Wikimedia enterprise, because a key question for digital commons infrastructure is the fact that there is no open stack all the way up, right? So when they had to build the pipelines that can connect to Google, for example, who was their first paid client, they could not rely on open source existing infrastructure that would give the level of service that Google required on day first. So they had to connect to Amazon Web Services, and it's a big shift for Wikimedia to connect itself to Amazon because of their philosophy of open source. So far, they really only chose open source tools, developing the tools themselves if they were not there, but they could not develop like the equivalent of Amazon Web Services, of course. So they connected to AWU using a connector that was open source at the time, a virtual. It's been a while. I don't have the right words right now, but so the idea is that there is no full open source stack, and even the way you connect to proprietary stack, the source code for these connectors can change from open to closed, which happened when the tool they were using was bought by, I think it was IBM, and so they changed the model. And so the idea is to then try and understand how you can maintain some sort of strategic autonomy in how you connect how you plug into a proprietary infrastructure, so that you're not locked into a proprietary system. And if an open stack is available one day or public stack, you can unplug easily and replug to the other infrastructure. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I have a quick question here. I mean, what happens is that there's not just the data that you can see of Wikipedia or anything. If you really want to use properly the data, as you noted, if you want to get it in large amounts and fast, then you need special clearance from the server, right? Which is one way to block. But the other thing is that the big difference between the GLAMs and people who would just scrap the web to get the images is that they have all the curation. So data is one thing, but data without knowing the quality, the freshness, the truth value, and also to respect the IP, this is stolen data. And just like stolen goods, it doesn't have the same value as if you have, the whole thing that describes you how you can use it, et cetera, et cetera. And I think one way of these comments will be able to not just the comments, but just all these GLAM, all these institutions, is that precisely they have the real data. They don't just have a copy of what was available on the web, which was what extracted. And probably that's one of the things that will happen, because when you start using more and more these LLMs, especially if you want to exploit them, which is what we're doing in our current projects here on massive data, you realize that you have to know much more about the data construction to be able to know how reliable your results or your extractions are. And so the full data is an iceberg and not just what's over the surface. I think this will force a better social contracts between those who want, for example, to be able to crop the data on a regular basis and look at the time series, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not lost on the side of data producers, right?
Yes, I think you mentioned a couple of important points. Well, one thing I would say is that actually the big ones, the bigger actors, like Google, Microsoft, and others, they have an interest in liability. So actually they are not the worst in terms of scraping. Actually, there are many other smaller rogue actors who scrape and resell. So they scrape and rebundle and resell, and these are the ones that are, the worst in terms of non-respecting robot.txt protocols. And another point in terms of the freshness of data, it's actually one of the key issue I would like to examine in the current phase of the project, which is that the Wikimedia projects, they are updated constantly, right? Because there's always someone who's awake in Thailand and who can create a new article about this current event. So there is freshness in Wikimedia data. Heritage collections, like talking with the BNF, they were saying, well, we have heritage data, so I don't think we can rely on the same model of incentive towards data freshness. But actually, I would like to challenge that idea that it's because it's heritage and memory and archival, there is no freshness, because I agree with your point that value is in curation, digitization, curation, and so this expertise can, is generative, right? So you can generate new data with digitizing. There's a lot of things that have not been digitized yet. So yes, this idea of freshness, I think, is key to understand both the differences, but also go beyond maybe some pre-assumptions that we have about it.
Yes, thank you very much for your talks and for your discussions, and we'll be able to continue this at lunch or wherever.